And one more topic for today, and I always have more topics than time. It's kind of the story of my life. More topics than time. This is just the way it goes. But I want to talk in this last segment about the data that came out. There's new information about COVID, and there are a bunch of stories to hit about this that actually are extremely consequential, just extremely consequential in our country. One, on COVID, I want to just tell you that there's a lot of data out now, and I want you to go to our website and read this yourself. But there's a new study out from the Annals of Internal Medicine. The Annals of Internal Medicine did a new study publishing on the question of just how contagious is COVID-19 really? How contagious is it? Once they're done with their study, and once you see what they had to say, you'll plainly understand that we have been hoodwinked, we have been manipulated into treating COVID-19 as this, as this tsunami of contagion that's going to overwhelm everyone unless we all duck and mask and cover and hide and stay at home. Not necessary. Not necessary. We have been played. Read the actual study, and then I'll tell you what it means. The study means we don't need to be wearing masks anymore. We don't need to be socially distancing. We don't need to limit the number of patrons allowed in restaurants, bars, and other places. We need to stop mass testing. We'll be on testing in a second again in a moment. But the entire contagion argument about America was a fraud. It's so important to understand. We got duped. So the contagion is not what we thought it was. I'll tell you just one little, several little tidbits on that subject to understand how extreme how extreme our beliefs have become because we've been manipulated and what the real facts are. Let me just give you one example. There was a recent study about where they had closely monitored individuals who had close contact with someone infected with COVID-19. Of those who had close contact with this asymptomatic person, so a person has COVID-19, they've been tested, but asymptomatic, only 1 out of 305 people who came into contact with this person who had COVID-19, asymptomatic but had it, only 1 in 305 contracted the virus. It's not the contagious fear-mongering thing that we've been taught. It's really, really important to understand this. Second thing is median age of fatality. Median age of fatality, 80. I mean, I don't want anyone to die. I want everyone to be healthy, but it's not. We are not in this country consumed. We are not facing a virus that's going to wipe out the mass population in this country. The median age of fatality is 80. We have been taught to obsessively fear, unjustifiably fear this, and unjustifiably fear the contagious nature of it. So we are now running around like lemmings. We're afraid. Some people, I'm not afraid. Some people are afraid to go out of their house. They're afraid to talk to their friends. They're afraid to give their friends a hug. They're afraid to go to events. You have event management teams afraid to host events in their places. I mean, you have the entire country wrapped up in this fear of contagion, unjustified by the actual data about how contagious. You got to read this study. And then, of course, you have Jerry Nadler and other leftists, when they realize good news is coming out. Oh, no, don't be listening to good news. Don't listen to good news. No, it's really, really bad. But yet you see they're out in public without masks. They are. You can catch pictures of them. Media will find pictures of them sitting around talking to people in public. But they think they can control us with this fear. If America can break the fear of fear of the contagion, we can break this lunacy that has overtaken our society. We're running around like scared children with masks and socially distancing. So read this study, Annals of Medicine, saying it's not the contagious nightmare that the left tried to tell us it was. Second is the idea of masks. There are so many studies now pointing out that, first of all, when you wear the kind of mask most people wear, which is not, hospital grade, it's just a piece of cotton, air is getting out the sides. It's not, stuck on your face. Air is getting out the sides, and you're not really protecting other people around you from your breathing, your normal breathing, because it's not containing all of the air that you are exhaling. Second is, it's very bad for people, healthy people, to even wear masks. It is actually unhealthy to wear masks. And so there's a long list of research, again, at our website. Go to our website, americacanwetalk.org, on the homepage under shows. Drop down list of links. This article, the COVID testing scam was just exposed in one graph. This article makes a point. The masks, there's a long list of articles, of research studies showing masks are not only not necessary, they're bad for you. And then second, this whole testing thing is a further scam. The testing thing is a scam because when you, and they have a great analogy here, it's like if you went around and asked 100 people today, how many of you are left-handed? And let's say it was 1 out of 100. And so you say, okay, now we have our data 1 out of 100. And so the next day you ask the next 100. So now you have 2 out of 200. And then the next day, 3 out of 300, up, 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 up. Point being, in day whatever, 27, you're going to have a big number of people who are left-handed compared with the first day. But it doesn't mean there is a contagion of left-handedness going around. It means you kept studying more people. If the ratio remains 1 in 10, nothing has changed in terms of left-handedness, or 1 out of 100, then no matter how many people you test. Well, the same is true of COVID testing. When the headlines scream new numbers, 374 new numbers, new test cases, or whatever the numbers they come up with, they're intended to be scary headlines, intending to create and perpetuate the culture of fear. So then the culture of submission. So you do whatever the government tells you because you're living in submission, because they put these numbers out there to scare you. If the ratio isn't changing, and it isn't, in fact, if anything, let me finish that point. If the ratio isn't changing, then there's not a reason to be alarmed. They're just testing more people. And this is what they've been doing with this testing. But I want to make a couple. There were just so many good points in this article I really, really want to share. Another one being this whole notion originally that asymptomatic people were big spreaders. Completely untrue. And in fact, they had they have all sorts of examples. And I mean, I can't even recount them all to you. I'm telling you, all these examples where they did test, they follow up. They had one test of 372 people CDC tracked down after having been tested, who had contact with either of these people who tested positive. 372 people were tracked down because they had gotten in contact with someone who confirmed case of COVID, and the answer was 0 people. 0 of those 372 who had close contact had contracted the virus. They also had, this gets pointless. We are fools to continue playing along with the fear of contagion and the idea that masks are somehow helping us. Masks are resulting in America being a nation living in fear and living in submission. Very, very dangerous and ungood for America. Next point, this was a big thing that made the news over the weekend, and I want to talk about it with a little bit of a qualifier. The CDC, Center for Disease Control, changed some data on their website, or made an announcement on their website. What they essentially said is, on their website, for 6% of the deaths, and so they have, to be clear, CDC has a number out there, whatever it is, 178,000 people they claim have died of COVID. And so on their website over the weekend, they said, for 6% of the deaths, COVID-19 was the only cause mentioned. So on the death certificate of these 192, whatever the number was, 178,000 total deaths, only 6%, or under 1,000. Under 1,000 of the COVID deaths, there was a death certificate that listed COVID as the only cause. For deaths with conditions or causes in addition to COVID, on average, there were 2.6 additional conditions or causes per death. So the hashtag went wild on Twitter saying only 6%, only 6%. And I want to just have one little qualifier about it, because I think the left is quickly trying to regroup itself and say, don't listen to that. No reason to stop fearing. Everybody still has to stay home. Everybody still has to wear a mask. Everybody has to stay shut down. We still can't have normal life. You can't have rallies. You can't have restaurants. They don't like the idea of America coming back, because they don't want the economy to become strong again, because then that helps President Trump. and they don't want America back to healthy and robust because then they can't control them. But I want to make a really important point. All that thing is saying is that when a doctor puts cause of death on a death certificate, and it was one of the deaths they counted in their data of 178,000 people who died of COVID, only 6% had COVID listed as the only cause of death. That does not mean, to be clear, there are several, so people trying to say that means that everybody else, the other 94%, had pre-existing conditions. That was the conclusion. It's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily flow. 6% had listed COVID only. The other 94% had COVID plus something else. But it is not clear from the data CDC has provided, or even if they have this data, whether people who fell in the other 94%, and were listed a COVID death, had some other condition, but the condition itself may have been caused by COVID. And I think it's important to understand this, because then you sound really smart talking to your friends who are quick trying to say, oh, this is another Twitter mob. They're crazy. In fact, Twitter is trying to take down every conversation about this 6% number. But let me just explain what I'm saying. So if you contract COVID, one of the things that happens sometimes when you contract COVID, you then develop pneumonia, you develop other respiratory ailments. So if you were healthy and you contract COVID, and then you contract pneumonia and some other ailment, respiratory ailment, your death certificate may say COVID, pneumonia, some other ailment. And so you'd be falling in the 94%, but you actually were a healthy person before you came in touch with COVID. The COVID caused the pneumonia, whatever else it is. I know this sounds like a little bit of parsing or a little unnecessary parsing, but the 6% number does not necessarily mean that the entire 94% of other people who died of COVID all had pre-existing conditions. Some of them may have had conditions listed on the death certificate that were caused by COVID. Having said that, it's also important to understand that the CDC caused much of this problem because early on they were urging doctors to put COVID as a cause of death even when they only suspected its presence. So there may not even be in that 6% that said COVID, those may be not even really COVID deaths. Those may have been deaths caused by other diseases or caused by a combination of diseases. But because the doctor thought the patient had COVID, the term was reasonably suspected COVID, they were allowed to use COVID as a cause of death. And say, so I'm just saying even the 6% number may be too high. It may not even be that. Maybe the doctors use that coding because they were forced to by CDC. And I know that everyone on the conservative side, myself included, I am completely aware that our country is being manipulated using the COVID-19 fear. Just like our country is being manipulated by the communist movement in our country, we're being manipulated by the COVID movement. We're being manipulated because we have people in high positions of power who want our country to remain shut down so the economy doesn't improve, because when the economy comes back, it helps President Trump get reelected. It also is, if you are of the mindset wanting to have America, lose our zest for freedom, lose our love of freedom, as every Marxist wants. Marxists want America to Americans to lose their love of freedom. This is a great vehicle to do this. A great vehicle when you have people suppressed, fearful, wearing masks, staying at home, afraid of everything. This helps develop the fearful mindset and helps, and what the Marxists want to do is have Americans lose their zest for freedom. But on the CDC thing I talked about in this caption, I think I have something called about connecting dots. I'm very serious when I tell you the COVID situation is being used as a political manipulation in this country, both because CDC's, playing with numbers, coming out with this, 6% only had COVID as the cause of death, which means what all of us have known for a long time. If you're otherwise healthy, you have almost no chance, unless you're like over 85, you're not going to die of COVID. And this is what leftists know, that the disease itself is not threatening to healthy people. It's not threatening to the mass majority of Americans. Even if you contract it, you're going to recover. You may have some symptoms, you may have to get some medication, get some treatment, but you're going to recover. If the fear could be lifted from the American people about this disease, this would be wonderful news for the Trump team, wonderful news for America, wonderful news for freedom, and really bad news for the leftists who have seen this as another way to begin to suppress the American people's love of freedom. But on the connecting dots thing, I want to be clear why I'm telling you. I think it's vital to understand that this whole COVID thing is being politically manipulated. I know we've talked about it a bunch of times on this show. We've talked about the idea, for example, that hydroxychloroquine, which we've had on this show, Dr. Robin Armstrong from Houston, Dr. Vet Lozano from here in Dallas. We've had doctors around the country talking about the idea hydroxychloroquine, especially when also prescribed with zinc and I can never say the word right, erythromycin, however you say the word, whatever, with a very clear protocol, using hydroxychloroquine is bringing tremendous results for people who have COVID. Why, ask yourself, why do CDC and other left-wing officials in the country, in Washington, why are they so determined to shut down the practice of prescribing hydroxychloroquine to people who have COVID? It is so extreme now that Robin Armstrong, who's been on the show before, a doctor in Houston, let me know over the weekend that Senator Warren, Elizabeth Hiawatha Warren, and 2 other Democrat senators are calling for an investigation into the nursing facility for which he was the doctor in Houston, and they had an outbreak of COVID-19, and he kept everyone at the facility. He did not send them off to the hospital. We've had him tell the story in the show twice. He has prescribed hydroxychloroquine along with the other 2 elements of part of the protocol, and he brought the entire patient population in this nursing home, a significant number of people, all the way through their COVID with 1 death, which was someone who was over 100 and had pre-existing conditions and was already in hospice. So this is a doctor who succeeded in bringing healing, bringing health back to people with COVID in a senior home. And that's who Elizabeth Warren and other Democrat senators want to investigate, that facility. And the terminology they were using, their announcement, Warren was using, this is the unauthorized use of hydroxychloroquine. It's not unauthorized. Doctors are allowed to prescribe off-label use of medications. They can prescribe a medication that has been approved, and they're allowed to do that, and they have always been allowed to do that. This is the first time we're hearing people who have no role in the medical world, such as Elizabeth Hiawatha Warren, saying, we're going to investigate, because who is he to use hydroxychloroquine? We don't care if it worked. You kind of think she ought to be talking about investigating the nursing homes in New York State instead, where the governor of that state managed to kill off many senior citizens in the nursing homes by moving COVID-infected patients out of hospitals and into nursing homes and infecting other people living in those nursing homes. That ought to be what she wants to investigate. But no, she wants to investigate the doctor and the facility where the patients with COVID-19 got better, where they recovered, where they moved on with their life because they used hydroxychloroquine. So you have the medical facility community attacking hydroxychloroquine. You have the medical facility also attacking budesonide. We had Dr. Richard Bartlett on this show. The inhaled budesonide, it's a steroid. It's a treatment for asthma. You had Dr. Bartlett explain it in great detail. Every single social media company in the country has taken that interview down. We still have it available now on our website if you want to see it. AmericaCanWeTalk.org. On the homepage, you can still see Dr. Bartlett's interview. Beneath the interview, you can see and click on his paper he wrote, which many of you have been emailing, asking for. You can find the paper there. But again, why is it when doctors around the country, it's not just this one doctor, around the country are saying budesonide works, it's really great, you should see what's happening, can't get attention, can't get the story told? And one last medication I'll mention briefly, we're going to have to wrap up today, but I will tell you that there's another medication out of Houston, and this is called oleandrin, and I'll just give you a quick hint about it. We're going to try to get one of the people working on oleandrin as a cure for COVID on the show, but oleandrin has shown great promise. It's actually been tested on COVID patients and has succeeded so the patients recover. It's a therapy that works on COVID-19 patients. It had already been through phase 1 and phase 2 of FDA testing. Oleandrin passed in flying colors the testing by the FDA, phase 1 and phase 2, the do no harm phases, so ready to be tried, and now that's being shut down. And again, you have to ask yourself why. I know one answer is the vaccine world, that you have Fauci and others intellectually, professionally, and financially invested in vaccines as a cure. You have the whole cabal of international globalists wanting the vaccine to be the cure. But in America, in this precious country rooted in freedom, we the people ought to be standing up to say, you cannot tell us we cannot use treatments that are therapies that our physicians are saying worked, that trials are showing worked, that patients who have used them have recovered. We don't live in a country where you can tell us we can't have access, or you can orchestrate and manipulate us so we can't get access to things that work. This is the most outrageous, outrageous suppression of the medical system, of the medical community in this country, of the right of doctors to practice medicine and the right of patients to pursue therapies that work. Outrageous suppression ongoing in this country, and everyone ought to be upset about it.